Driving Force Radio, where we seek to discover what drives today's leaders. On today's show, my co-host is Steve McMillan, the editor of public policy at the Denver Post. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Hey, thanks, Jan. Good to be back.
You know, it's been a long time since we got together, but as always, you bring such compelling content when you come to the show, and today is no different.
Today, we are going to be looking at Denver Public Schools. It's really viewed as a model nationally of successful school reform.
Yeah.
Enrollments are up, graduation rates are up, they're getting grants, performance is strong, although there are some areas where there's improvement that's needed. We're here today. We're going to talk with Denver Public Schools Superintendent Tom Boasberg. He's going to tell us about it and probably tell us about a lot more.
That's awesome. Welcome to the show, Superintendent
Thank
Boasberg.
you. Happy to be here.
Okay, Tom. It's been a really busy fall for the Denver Public Schools. I think one of the highlights certainly has been the passage of the $515 million bond issue and mill levy. Can you talk to us about what that means for the district, how the money's going to be used, what you've done so far to implement new programs and building upgrades?
Sure, happy to. And we were thrilled to see the result of the election this fall. You know, the last couple of years have been years of tremendous growth for the Denver Public Schools. We've become the fastest growing school district in the country, of any city in the country. And literally the last 4 years we've grown by over 10,000 kids, something like 15%. There's no other city in the country that's even in double digits. And I just think that's a real reflection of the significant improvement in our schools, and so many more of our families are saying we want our kids in the Denver Public Schools, which is wonderful. That being said, that huge surge of enrollment also has its challenges, and we've gone from a school district that frankly was under-enrolled, and we're not too long ago we were closing down school buildings because we had too much capacity, to one now where many of our buildings are absolutely bursting at the seams and we're at over capacity, and we're seeing areas of the city that are also growing very strongly. So in November, we asked the voters for two things. One was for a bond, and a bond is for investment in our facilities, our long-term assets, to help renovate our older buildings, to help expand capacity. And we also asked voters, and voters also approved, a mill levy. And a mill levy is a property tax increase for operating costs, to hire teachers and pay for costs every year. And we were thrilled to see both of them pass by 30-some points. Right, there's overwhelming support for both measures. But I'm happy to talk further. But in short, what the bond means is we'll be able to expand our capacity to meet and deal with the overcrowding. I mean, we'll be able to renovate our buildings, which, while beautiful on the outside, historic,
right,
or often on the inside, need a heck of a lot of work to upgrade our technology. It'll also mean that we, on the mill levy side, the operating side, we'll be able to dramatically expand our early childhood for our 4-year-olds in poverty, and full-day kindergarten for our 5-year-olds. We'll be able to expand our arts and music and enrichment for our students. And we'll be able to put in place an intensive tutoring program in math to help make sure all of our kids are caught up and are on grade level and ready to go to high school, prepared for high school math.
You know, that's so fantastic to hear that there's so many new developments with this. And I know that part of the bond money is going to go to building the downtown Denver Expeditionary School over on Lincoln. And where did the idea for that school come from, and what is it all about?
We've been in discussions for a number of years with the city and the Downtown Denver Partnership and the downtown organizations that have really been devoted to having downtown be a livable downtown, and a place not just for businesses but for families, and having a downtown school that can help serve the families that are downtown, help attract more families to live downtown, and again have downtown not just be a 9-to-5 place or a place with some nightlife, but also truly a place for families. Having a downtown elementary school is critical for that. So we approved last June the creation of a new downtown Denver Expeditionary School. And by expeditionary, part of the school's philosophy is to really take advantage of the cultural offerings of downtown, of the partnership opportunities with civic institutions, with businesses, to expose kids to all the richness that downtown has to offer. And so we'll be opening, beginning this fall, a downtown Denver Elementary School. And I just think that's a very exciting development for downtown and the vibrancy and livability of our downtown. And I think, you know, frankly, somewhat symbolic of what we're seeing overall in the city, of how much more attractive Denver has become for a place for families to move into. And that's very much in part of the work the city is doing in terms of the quality of life in the city, but also very much in part of having strong schools that attract families back into Denver and to live in Denver.
You mentioned the downtown Denver partnership being involved in the decision to locate the school downtown. What's the partnership been like with the business community for Denver Public Schools?
Yeah. I think we have a very strong partnership with the with the business community and the Denver Public Schools, and clearly the business community has a very strong interest in a quality public school system for the children of their employees. These are their future. This is their future workforce, and so it's terrific to see so many business leaders come out, for example, and support the passage of the tax increases in the fall. And I know tax increases in business don't necessarily always match, but the business community has been very thoughtful and very progressive and supportive of making sure the public schools are improving. But also, you know, in a way they should be demanding a high degree of accountability. And the business community has rightly pushed hard that we rethink a number of the ways that we operate, that we seek to have a more entrepreneurial environment in the Denver Public Schools, where we've really tried to decentralize and push much more autonomy and decision-making power to principals and school communities, and have a significantly higher degree of accountability. Because I think it's fair to say, if you look at most school systems in the country, two of the first words you don't think of are autonomy and accountability. And we think the two go together. They're inseparable, right? Our schools do need to be empowered. They do need to have autonomy and flexibility, but they also need to be accountable. They need to be accountable for their performance in educating our kids and making sure that our kids are seeing academic growth every year. And sometimes politically that's been difficult and politically controversial. But we think it's very, very important that our schools have both that autonomy and that accountability to enable them to perform and for their performance.
Well, and you talked about this too. I mean, early childhood ed has been one of those things that's sort of one of those drivers that really sort of supports the success going forward on that larger journey through education. Talk about what you guys are doing in this early childhood ed arena, because again, you are at Denver Public Schools, you're one of those leaders, and you're certainly those proponents for getting kids engaged at this early level. Yeah,
so thank you, and it's been nice. We have really played a bit of a leadership role locally and nationally in this, and I think the data is very, very clear that when students have the opportunity for early childhood, you see significant long-term improvements. And there's been study after study, longitudinal study that's tracked kids over decades that has shown the benefits of early childhood education. And frankly, middle-class families know that, right? Middle-class families make sure their kids have the opportunity to go to preschool. And I think it's so important for our families in poverty to have that same opportunity. We have really striking achievement gaps in the Denver Public Schools, and we have a tremendous amount of work to do to close those achievement gaps between students from middle-class families and lower-income families, students, for example, are from our white kids compared to African-American Latino kids. These are real gaps that we need to close, and we've got a heck of a lot of work to do better to close these gaps, because you know, come from a very strong belief that every kid when they're born, regardless of how much money their mom or dad makes or what color their skin is, right? They have that same set of distribution of talents and potential and ability. We've got to tap that talent. We've got to tap that ability. In early childhood, the chance for students to start in preschool, to have a rigorous education, to have the opportunity for language acquisition and for beginning to think in mathematics is so important. And again, many of our middle-class families, they have that at home, they have that access to preschool. For our lower-income families, that's not true. So this is a great opportunity creator, it's a great equalizer. I feel that very strongly on moral grounds, but even just on pure investment grounds. If you just want to look on return on investment, the ROI, right? The return on investment of the dollars we spend on preschool get repaid many times over in terms of the productivity, the kinds of jobs that people are able to have, the greater increased likelihood of people going to college. So this is something just as a pure investment, as well as, frankly, I think as a moral issue and as a social issue, is very important. And this is also one where the business community, again, has been very supportive of expanding our early childhood.
Is that what that $30 million race to the top money is for? Strictly for early childhood education or teacher training pertaining to that? Or
it is. So the state of Colorado recently won $30 million of race to the top money from the federal government to really help the state expand our early childhood, to put in quality measures, to put in quality teacher training. And I think that's a great jump start. Frankly, that $30 million, those are startup costs. Right now, the state of Colorado, I think to our shame, does not even fund full-day kindergarten. That's wrong. That for 5-year-olds, we say we'll fund you for half day, the other half day, good luck. If your family has means, maybe you can, pay for something. And I do think it's so essential that we as a state that we fund full-day kindergarten and that we fund preschool, particularly for our kids in poverty. So thrilled to see that as a start. But this is going to require our legislature to come together and have the willingness to increase the investment that we make in our kids. And again, from a purely investment standpoint, hardly any better investment that you'll find than investing in early childhood.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask about the Gates money and the Ford Foundation money.
Yeah.
There are other grants that have recently come into the district or the state. I mean, what's that money going to be used for?
So, during this budget crunch these last 4 years with the economic, severe recession, public schools in Colorado, including the Denver Public Schools, have been hammered. We've lost, over 10% per kid in terms of the dollars we get from the state, $800 for every kid in the district. And heck, 4 years ago, before the recession started, we were already one of the lowest funded states in the country in terms of our commitment to K-12 education, and now we've been hammered by another $800 a kid. So what we have said is, one, we're going to try and work with our community to go to voters and raise taxes, which we were able to do this fall overwhelmingly. We're also going to, work our tails off to raise every dollar of private money out there that can help support our kids in our schools. And in the last, 4 years, we've raised over $150 million of private and government competitive grants, where we've gone out and competed against other districts or other entities for that money from foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, from the federal government. And we've been very fortunate in order to obtain some of these grants. And I think it's really helped through the downturn, helped us continue to invest. That these grants, none of these foundations are going to pay for your operating costs. Though if you have a good idea about how you're going to reform and try and move the ball forward, they're willing to invest in some of that reform and change. So, for example, we've gotten very significant investments from the Wallace Foundation to invest in the quality of our principals. That's allowed us to significantly improve the quality of our recruitment and training and preparation for our principals. So, for example, this year for the first time, we have a very innovative principal residency program where we took our highest performing assistant principals and we're putting them for 1 year as effectively residents in the schools of very high performing principals to learn from those principals about how to be a great principal. And we're doing that not just in our high performing district run schools, but also in our high performing charter schools, because we believe very strongly in partnering with our high performing charter schools. And so then they'll have this real intensive year of training and be that much better prepared for principals. That's an example. The Gates Foundation has really helped us improve the work we do with preparing and coaching and providing guidance and accountability for our teachers, our teacher effectiveness and teacher quality work. So those are examples where we've been lucky to bring in some of this money, and it's really helped us at a time of real retrenchment and budget cuts to continue to invest and continue to innovate, because I do think innovation is critical here. That too much of our school systems, we've done the same things for too long, and frankly, some things have worked, but some things haven't worked. And I know the political pressure not to change is high, but we've got to be willing to innovate, and we've got to be willing to break a status quo, which frankly hasn't worked for too many of our kids for too long.
Absolutely, and I want to swing back around to something that you were talking about. You know, we've been talking about grants and private money and really using those monies for innovation. Yet we're seeing all of these cuts here in our state for K-12 as well as higher education in this state. And you said something about that we must, you know, that we've got to really get the legislature to fund this stuff because it is so important to our competitiveness as well as our innovative standing in the U.S. How are we going to do that? We have local control everywhere. Everyone's got a great idea, if you will, and I'm not saying anything negative about that, but we have small rural districts, we have huge districts like Denver Public Schools. How do we do that? How do we begin to work together and create that change that needs to get done?
Great, so thank you. So I think, you know, we as a state, I think, need to come together, and this needs to go to voters with effectively a package of reforms plus resources. That we've often had this stale debate. On one side says you got to reform, the other side says, well, just give us the money, and you need both, right? We do need the resources, but there also do need to be reforms in the way that we operate and do business. And I think that needs to come together as a package and go to voters. In Colorado, while it is a local control state where individual districts have authority to operate in their own districts, all districts are funded by the state. And it is state funding, and I think that's the right thing to make sure there's a degree of equalization between, you know, rich counties and poor counties, because we've got plenty of poor counties and poor areas in the state, both rural and, you know, urban. Denver actually is fortunate we're one of the wealthiest counties in terms of our tax base, but we have many surrounding jurisdictions that don't have that tax base, and we need to make sure they are funded as well. So I do think, you know, right now, if you look at Colorado, we fund our K-12 kids at less than half of what kids are funded at in states like Maryland or Massachusetts and New Jersey. That's wrong, right? I mean, our kids are going to be competing against those kids for universities, for jobs. But I think it's important, and I'm hopeful in this legislative session, that we come together and have a real discussion of the package of resources and reforms that we can then hopefully both D's and R's, you know, get together and put to voters, hopefully as soon as this fall, to say here's a package of reforms that is coupled with a tax increase, right? That is coupled with a request for money. And I think we saw, you know, what was really nice this last election was it wasn't just a Denver thing. We worked really hard in Denver the last couple of years with our suburban jurisdictions, with Jefferson County, with Cherry Creek and Aurora. It's no coincidence that all of us went together on the same ballot. Right, each of us had a separate election in our own district, but we all went in the November ballot. Because this is not just a need in a suburb or a city or in one area or another. We all have this need. And it was very nice to see that all of the districts won, and won quite convincingly in terms of their ballot initiatives where they asked voters for either a bond or a mill levy, a tax increase. And I think that's really created a lot of momentum going in this legislative session, that if you can create a strong, concrete, tangible proposition for voters about what this means for voters, with a high degree of accountability of how their money is going to be spent, that voters in this state will step up and invest in education.
How does the Lobato case play into this, Tom? It's a court case brought by a rural area that said it's woefully underfunded by the state, but this is big money that's on the line. The Court of Appeals has heard the case. We're waiting for a ruling there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we supported the Lobato case, and again recognized that there, you know, the district that brought it in Center County is, you know, tremendous needs. But they weren't just speaking for themselves. They were speaking for districts across the state, and the judge did find that the current funding mechanism was inadequate to meet the constitutional provision of a thorough and equitable education in the state. You know, that case is on appeal. Frankly, you know, whatever happens in the courts, this has to come back to the legislature, right? I appreciate what the court has said, but this is the ball is in the legislature's court, working with the governor to act on this. And in case or no case, the legislature, I think, really looking forward to working with them, and I think there's a lot of leadership within the legislature, on this issue to act. And I know the governor cares passionately and cares deeply about education. So I think really again that regardless of how the court decides, whether the court orders the legislature to act or ultimately doesn't order the legislature to act, I think we're in the same place, which is for us to come together and really come together in a package of reforms and resources that have real concreteness and accountability to them, and put that measure to voters for their support.
Well, and I think too, it often gets lost in this conversation. It's the snippets on the news that you see where it's superintendents and the folks that are the leadership of schools saying we have to do this. But I think the average citizen doesn't really know what they need to do. Talk about how parents and or business leaders or those folks out in the community that are supporting your districts, whether it's Denver Public Schools, Cherry Creek, or Grand County, whatever it is, that they can engage with districts and truly do something to help.
Yeah. So thank you, and I sort of divide a little bit, very personal and community and political. So on the personal standpoint, we very much want to have our parents involved in our schools. Every school has a school governance committee that's formed of parents and teachers and the principal. We very much welcome parent voice and parent participation on that governance committee that looks at critical things and helps decide, for example, school budgets, because we're in a very decentralized environments where schools get to decide on their own budget. So that parent leadership is critical. We want parents in our classrooms helping to volunteer, to read to our kids, to come speak to our kids, to be mentors, for our kids. And I think those, individuals, both parents, community members who work on that personal level, I'm deeply, deeply grateful to. Now, not every parent, right, or business person has the time to mentor a young person or come in and read to kids in the classroom and help them with their reading.
Right.
But many of them, we have partnerships in many of our schools with business organizations, with community organizations. And sometimes, again, those are mentorships, but sometimes those are in-kind contributions. Sometimes those are cash contributions that those community organizations make. And finally, frankly, on the community and political side is this discussion about what we need as a community is essential that as a democracy that every parent and community member participate in. And we're a society right now with very significant gaps, and you can see them along racial lines, you can see them along economic lines. We need to close those gaps, right? I mean, this is right now, our generation has the risk, if we don't turn things around, of being the first generation in the history of our country where our kids have a lower college going rate than the generation that preceded them. That's wrong. And it's so critical for our economic future, right, that we used to be a generation to go first in the world in terms of percentage of our kids going to college. We're now something like 15th or 20th, right? And that is a matter of making sure we're preparing our kids for college. We have a real rigor in terms of our schools, that we're funding our schools. Because if you look at the jobs in today's market, right, almost any job that's going to provide any kind of economic future requires some form of post-secondary education. That could be a four-year college, could be a two-year college, it could be a career and tech course, right, in health services and welding and automotive. But kids need to graduate from high school and they need to have those post-secondary opportunities, and we need to make sure that we are both resourcing and having a degree of expectations and accountability for our schools that make sure far more of our kids than is true today graduate from high school prepared for college and career.
Absolutely.
The Emily Griffith Tech School is a component of DPS that could offer just that kind of training that's post-secondary, not college, right?
It is, and Emily Griffith is a wonderful school. It was founded 100 years ago in Denver by a visionary woman, Emily Griffith, to meet the needs of immigrants at that time in Denver. Many of those immigrants were from Southern and Eastern Europe. Well, 100 years later, we have exactly the same need to meet the needs of many of our immigrants. And many of those immigrants are from Central and South America. They have exactly the same needs that my great-grandfather had, when he came to this country. And Emily Griffith is a school that serves thousands of students a year, both students who graduate from high school, adult ed, in these career and tech fields. And in these fields of really giving people professional skills. And again, that could be nursing services, that could be computer design services, that could be electrical or plumbing type skill services. And we're thrilled. We've just announced a brand new building for Emily Griffith in downtown, very convenient to transport, that's going to allow them to be in a more modern and a much higher quality building that's going to allow them to expand because of that critical element of career and technical education for our community.
And when we come back, we'll have more with Superintendent Boasberg as well as Steve McMillan from the Denver Post, and we'll be looking at some of those dynamics of closing the gap, the fabulous school design that's going on, and some of the legislation when we come back. Don't go anywhere.